Hey everybody! So the other day I made a video. The video I'm referring to was about being bigendered and what that would look like or does look like, and introducing the two halves of what makes me bigendered. So a lot of people said, like, is this a joke? Like, oh my god, you're the reason why nobody takes being transgendered seriously, and a lot of really, really negative stuff. Well, I think that a lot of the anger, because that's what it was, a lot of the anger was a little bit misguided because a lot of it came from the trans community. And I think that the reason why it's important to point that out is because who better to understand being marginalized and being told that you're crazy and that you need to go see a psychologist than the trans community. And so I just want to point out that I think that a lot of the misinformation that there is about bigenderism is similar to the misinformation and misconceptions that go along with being bisexual. And I think it's interesting that the stereotyping and the hate that come from within the LGBT community and from within the trans community is very different than the hate and the mistrust and the misunderstandings that come out of the cis community. The cis community has no intrinsic reason to be able to empathize. They don't know what dysphoria is. They don't understand what it means to be gender nonconforming or to be anything but cis and heterosexual. However, within the LGBT community, I think that the hate is almost it's more about worrying, I think, about being invalidated because of another identity that they see as a potential threat to themselves. So for example, within the gay community, I think people get angry about the notion of bisexuality because they feel as though the cis community looks at bisexuality as a joke. And because a lot of the decisions that are made about the gay community come from the cis community, the idea that the cis community would not take seriously part of the gay community makes the gay community very nervous, because then they're afraid that they won't get laws passed that are good for them. And I think in the trans community it's very similar, at least from what I've gleaned in the last week or so and from just doing previous research on the subject. I think that a lot of people in the trans community who are familiar with the term bigenderism, which granted is rather new, I think that they don't trust it and they don't like it, and I think that the justification comes from the idea that the cis community will look at it as being weird and crazy, and therefore will think, well, that's relatively similar, kind of similar to that whole transgendered thing, and so therefore neither one of them is valid. And I understand that, but I also feel as though it's a little bit unfair for the very people who understand what being marginalized and being told you're crazy feels like to do that to somebody else. As a community and as just people, we shouldn't be spending so much time tearing each other down. Shouldn't the whole point of being in a community be to build each other up and help each other out, even if you don't understand? If you don't understand something, and I've never understood this about the internet at all, if you don't understand something or you don't like it, just don't say anything. Like, you're wasting your breath, basically. Because obviously whoever it is that you're saying something nasty to is they're not going to change their opinion and or their attitude or opinion. It's just not your place. And they might hurt themselves. Like, do you really want to be responsible for somebody hurting themselves when it took you all of 30 seconds to say, you suck and I think you're crazy and you're an idiot and you're going to be embarrassed about this in 10 years? Like, is it really worth it? Is their potential to hurt themselves worth that to you when they were just trying to inform other people about their situation? And I think it's sad that people say, like, well, if you post something on the internet, you shouldn't be surprised if there are people who disagree with it. Well, no, you shouldn't be surprised when people disagree with it, but I am continuously surprised when I watch YouTube videos and scroll down and see all the negative things that people write. Like, it just makes much more sense to me to take the time to write something positive to somebody than to write something negative to somebody. And I'm disappointed. I guess that's really the crux of this video, is just to say that I made that previous video as an educational tool because I was getting a lot of questions on Tumblr asking me to explain bigenderism, and I was having a lot of difficulty doing that in words without it being convoluted. So I just thought, the best way to do this is to make a video where I just back to back show you the difference between how I feel as a man and how I feel as a woman. And it wasn't for it. I didn't do it as a joke, first of all. That was completely a fair evaluation of how my life works. And two, it was specifically for the people who had asked me about it. And now the second question that I got a lot from the people who were unhappy about it is, well, why did you tag it as FTM? Well, because if I'm in the process of transitioning, which is something that I'm considering, and I'm born a woman, that would make me FTM. And so I think it's not unreasonable to post things about bigenderism on the FTM tag if you're in the process of transitioning. Do you? Does that seem really unreasonable? Because you'd still want to have the same sort of resources that a person who's strictly transgender would want to have, I would imagine. I don't know, that was something I didn't understand about the comments that I got on that video. And that's really all I have to say about that. So I hope that that is a conclusive explanation for the nature of that video, if you were upset by it. And I hope that we can eventually get to a place where you don't, if you're a member of the trans community who was offended, that you don't feel so offended, because it's not a direct attack. It's not an attack at all, but it's certainly not an attack on you to make transgenderism seem less than serious, because I understand, as a person who falls under that category, how it feels to not be taken seriously. And so I would appreciate it, on behalf of the people in the bigender community, if you would do the same and give us the same courtesy. And by the way, I looked into this and I asked my counselor about it, but multiple personality disorder is not anything like bigenderism. And I could go into all the details as to why, but basically I'll just say that multiple personality disorder requires that you don't know what you're doing for long periods of the day. And all the bigender people, or the self-identifying bigender people that I've ever met, don't have that experience, myself included. So you might want to do a little bit of research before you start calling names. I hope that was a informative and good explanation, and I do hope that that helps sort of steady the waters a little bit, because it wasn't my intention to make everybody angry. It was actually my intention to inform people who had asked me about that as to what I meant, and that was all. So there you go. Now, before I start babbling on, as I fear I already have started to do, I will end this. So, alright.